they found the first tooth on the riverbank. It was large, too large for a human, and curved like a wolf's fang. Yellowed. Root intact. It pulsed faintly in the moonlight, as if still alive. 3 days later, the river dried up. Not from drought. From withdrawal. The water receded in a single night, revealing a slick bed of black stone and something beneath, carved stairwells, broken bells, bones shaped like instruments. And the town of Weatherdyke remembered its shame. Elspeth Vale was not from Weatherdyke. She arrived by motorcar on the last Thursday of September, sent by the Historical Trust to investigate the river's disappearance. She brought with her 3 suitcases, a leather-bound notebook, and a black parasol that never opened. Her welcome committee consisted of a vicar, a mute boy, and a drunk named Harrow who kept muttering, don't go down," as he bled from the gums. She smiled politely, checked into the Weeping Hart Inn, and that night she dreamed of teeth. The next morning, she descended to the dry riverbed. It was slick with moss, but not the kind she recognized. The stone was grooved in perfect concentric rings, like an ear listening from below. At the river's center stood a rusted bell tower, broken, ancient, and half swallowed by the mud. She took out her notebook and sketched. Her pencil broke on the 3rd line. Inside the tower, it was darker than night. Not just the absence of light, but something deeper, a hunger for it. The shadows curled along the walls. Water still dripped, though there was no water left. And at the base of the bell support beams lay a skeleton. Wearing robes. Wearing bells. Tiny ones, sewn into the hem. And where the teeth should have been, there were none. Elspeth blinked. The bell rang. No wind had touched it. No hand had moved it. Yet the sound spread through her like smoke. Soft, deep, wet. She staggered backward, and her heel struck something. A second tooth. This one cracked, hollow inside, and filled with salt. The town changed after that. Children stopped speaking. Old women covered mirrors. And on the second Friday, the church bell tolled at midnight, even though no one had touched the rope in years. Harrow hanged himself from the steeple. They buried him without ceremony. Elspeth stayed. Not because she had to. Because she had started dreaming in bell tongue, an ancient hum that moved her pen while she slept. When she awoke, her notebook was full of drawings. Of mouths. Of teeth. Of something curled at the bottom of the river, singing. She asked the vicar. He turned pale. Before Weatherdyke, he said, there was Bellmere. A town? She asked. He nodded. And before Bellmere, the Bellman. Old story, he continued. Before the cross came. Before words. They say the Bellman kept the river from flooding with his voice. That his teeth were iron and his tongue was made of stone. What happened to him? He taught the wrong one to listen. Elspeth found the 3rd tooth under her pillow. It had her name scratched into the enamel. Backwards. That night, the bells rang again. But this time, they weren't from the church. They came from beneath. From under the stone. Under the town. Under her skin. She woke in the graveyard, barefoot and smiling, and beside her stood the mute boy, pointing to the church well. There were voices coming from inside it, low, harmonious, hungry. He held out a torn scrap of paper. It read, "To enter the choir, offer your teeth." Elspeth smiled wider, and one by one, she began to pull. Elspeth lost 3 teeth that night. She woke with blood on her tongue, tasting rust and salt. No pain. Just a hollow pressure in her gums, like something had been taken, not torn. The scrap of paper still rested beside her. To enter the choir, offer your teeth. The boy was gone. Outside, the world felt muffled, like sound had taken a step back. The church bell didn't ring that morning. Neither did the birds. Weatherdyke had changed again. Shadows lengthened faster than they should. The people moved in choreographed silence. Children walked in pairs, humming in tones that made Elspeth's eyes water. No one met her gaze. The vicar had locked himself inside the chapel, muttering scripture not found in any Bible she knew. She knocked on his door. "Something's wrong with the light," he whispered. "What do you mean?" "It doesn't land anymore. It floats. Like it's waiting for something to open its mouth." Then he screamed. "The bellman has no lips." She didn't knock again. Back at the inn, the owner refused to enter her room. "There's humming," he mumbled. "Like violins, but inside out." She closed the door behind her and listened. The sound was coming from her suitcase. She opened it and found her notebook. The pages had rewritten themselves. Gone were her careful notes and architectural sketches. Instead, a single phrase repeated in thin, looping script. "I am the instrument." Page after page, until at the very back, she found a new drawing. Her face. But changed. No eyes. No teeth. Just a black slit where the mouth should be, wide as her chin, ringing with music. She smiled despite herself. She returned to the riverbed that night. The bell tower still stood, rusted and bowed. But it was no longer alone. Stone figures had begun to rise around it, half-formed statues, as if something beneath was pushing up, sculpting faces in the rock. And they all looked like people from the town. Harrow, the baker's wife, even the mute boy, all open-mouthed, all frozen mid-note. Elspeth stepped into the tower again. The shadows had changed color, deeper now, purple-black, vibrating. The skeleton in bells was gone. In its place, a rope, fresh, white, and wet. She knew without knowing. It was his tongue. A note trembled through the air, so low it shook her spine. She dropped to her knees. And the stone floor split. Beneath the bell tower was a stairwell. Winding, dripping, carved in a spiral with teeth in place of railings. She descended. With each step, she heard the hum grow louder, no longer just sound, but language. A choir singing to her inward, each note unmaking her bones into hollow reeds. At the bottom, a door made of ivory and metal. It opened at her touch. Inside was a chamber of mouths. Dozens. Hundreds. All carved into the walls. Some singing. Some biting the air. All moving in rhythmic intervals, like lungs breathing without bodies. In the center stood a dais. Upon it, a bell. It was small, black, cracked, and behind it, a man. Or what was left of one. He was robed in rags and ropes, hung with bells and bones. His face was bare, no eyes, no nose, no lips. Just a mouth. Too wide, too deep. His chest rose and fell with no breath. The bellman. Elspeth stepped forward. He did not move. But his mouth opened, and her teeth began to itch. "You heard me," he said. Not aloud, but in her mind. In the wet place where dreams hatch. "You carried me here. You rang the first chord." Elspeth nodded. "I dreamed of you before I came. Because you came before you dreamed." The bellman raised a hand. In it, a single molar. Her own. Still warm. "Will you give the rest?" Her mouth bled in reply. She stepped onto the dais. The bell pulsed. The world above has forgotten. But they will remember the sound. The old water. The black water. The music that fed on silence. The bellman lowered the tooth into a bowl filled with salt. "Become the mouth." She opened hers. Her scream became a song. Not of pain. Of removal. Of joy in vanishing. Of her voice joining the many. The mouths on the wall began to harmonize. The black bell rang. And above, in Weatherdyke, rain fell for the first time in years. It was red. It hummed as it fell. And those it touched began to sing. Rain had not fallen in Weatherdyke for 12 years. And yet, by morning, the cobbled streets were drowning in red. Not crimson. Not scarlet. Something darker, like congealed wine and rusted iron. It did not splash. It slithered. It crawled toward doorsteps. It sought voices. and when it touched flesh, it sang. The townspeople changed quickly. Their mouths never closed. Their words unraveled into syllables too perfect, too rehearsed, like they were reading from a hymnal no hand had written. Their eyes filmed over with a pearl-gray glaze. They no longer knocked before entering houses, because they were no longer people. They were the choir of the red hymnal, and they were looking for Elspeth. She had not left the chamber. Her body floated above the black bell like smoke held in the shape of a woman. She was more vibration than form, her mouth open, but not to speak, to receive. She had learned the Bellman's tongue, and she was teaching it back to the stone. Each note she released etched new mouths into the walls. Some whispered, some begged. A few bit her as she passed. She loved them equally. But she had not yet finished. One note remained, the last note, the one the Bellman had torn from himself when the first river rose and tried to swallow the sun. It was buried in the salt. Above, in Weatherdyke, the sky pulsed with a red rhythm. The children stood at windows with ink dripping from their ears. The vicar lit candles in a perfect circle and slit his throat in 7 directions. No one died anymore. They just changed key. At the inn, the mute boy returned. But he was not mute now. He hummed in frequencies that shattered glass. And when he opened his mouth, the rain came in, not out. He wandered from house to house, searching for Elspeth. He was her herald now. He carried her tune inside him. And with each person he touched, they became an instrument. Elspeth sank through stone. She moved down, past the mouth chamber, through layers of memory and bone. There, in a submerged cathedral no one had built, she found the first choir. Statues of ash, draped in rotted robes. Mouths wired shut with red thread. They had sung the world into being, the Bellman told her. But they'd sung it wrong. Their rhythm was flawed. Their voices individual. They'd been punished by stillness, by silence. And now, Elspeth would correct the mistake. She would rescore the world. She reached the altar. It was made of mirrors, cracked and black. She saw herself reflected 10,000 ways, with no face, with many mouths, as a bell with no clapper. Atop the altar, a book bound in wet leather, the red hymnal, unwritten, waiting. She pressed her teeth to the cover. The pages filled themselves, with music, with screams, with truths shaped like wounds. And when she sang from it, the world above broke open. In Weatherdyke, the buildings melted, not from heat, from reverence. The stone bowed, the wood wept. Doors unhinged themselves. Windows opened wide and swallowed wind. People danced without feet, screamed with lungs that no longer needed air. The mute boy climbed to the belfry. He rang the old church bell with his own skull. And the river returned, black as ink, wide as memory, filled with teeth. The Bellman watched it all from the chamber below. He was fading. Elspeth had become the mouth now. The song no longer needed him. He wept salt, and sang his last breath into her name. Elspeth rose from the cathedral like smoke curling up a flute. She passed through the dry stairwells, into the bell tower, into the open air. The town knelt, not out of fear, but in melody. They had become a single voice, a living chord, a town-shaped instrument tuned by blood and devotion. Elspeth opened her mouth, and the sun blinked. She sang the river to life again. She sang the trees into red blossom. She sang the clouds into silence. And when she sang Weatherdyke's name backward, the town forgot it had ever existed. Only one person remained unchanged, the vicar's daughter, blind, deaf, tongueless since birth. She stood at the edge of the drowned town, untouched by the rain. She watched Elspeth with empty eyes. And she remembered. She carried the silence like a blade, and soon she would use it. Elspeth stood at the center of Weatherdyke. But Weatherdyke no longer existed. It was a shape of memory now, Stone turned to sound, people turned to breath. The houses were chords, the streets were measures, the trees rang like violins in the wind. Her choir, 100 strong, sang from beneath their skin. And above them all, she floated like the final note of a requiem. She no longer needed words. Her voice was pure intention, sculpting the world not with will but with resonance. She had unmade time, inverted gravity, rewritten blood. But she had not yet unmade silence. And silence had come to meet her. The vicar's daughter stepped into the Red River, untouched. No sound clung to her. No music moved around her. She was a blade of stillness, narrow, exact, unbending. The world dimmed where she passed. Not darker, just absent. She carried no weapon, yet every breathless step she took sliced away another note of the grand symphony Elspeth had built. Mouths stopped singing. Statues crumbled. Clouds frayed. Elspeth descended to meet her. They stood across from each other, 2 women, 2 echoes, one of sound, one of void. The choir behind Elspeth trembled in minor chords. Why do you resist? Elspeth's voice rang like 7 bells tuned to the bones of saints. There is no pain in music, no hunger, no loneliness. The girl said nothing. She simply opened her palm, and in it, a tooth. Small, white, human. Elspeth recognized it. It was her first. With trembling breath, Elspeth reached out. When her finger touched the tooth, everything stopped. The river froze mid-current. The sky ceased its rotation. Even breath hung in the throats of her choir. The girl closed her fist. And silence fell. It wasn't just absence of noise. It was anti-song. It reached backward through time and unwrote. The bellman's tower cracked. The mouths in the chamber shriveled. Notes evaporated from the red hymnal. And Elspeth began to shrink. Her arms lost harmony. Her lips dissolved back into soft, wordless flesh. Her teeth reformed, aching and mortal. She screamed. But no sound came. Only the echo of the vicar's daughter, staring through her with eyes carved from the quiet between heartbeats. Elspeth stumbled. The choir fled into the earth, writhing in their unfinished tunes. The sky opened. No thunder. Just a gap. A cleft in being. And from within, silence's true face. Not a god. Not a void. But a cradle. Empty. And wanting to stay that way. The bellman's corpse crumbled in its salt tomb. His bells rusted into dust. The red hymnal burned in inkless flame. And Elspeth wept, not for what she lost, but for the beauty that silence had denied. Still she reached for one final note. A hum. A memory. A child's lullaby sung by a mother she no longer remembered. It rose like a feather. Soft. Innocent. Unscored. The vicar's daughter caught it in her hand. She opened her mouth. Not to sing, but to breathe. And that breath. Let the world begin again. Rain returned. Not red. Just rain. The real kind. It fell on green earth and gray stone. The river trickled like a memory forgiven. The people of Weatherdyke woke in their beds with no memory of songs or teeth or bells. The mute boy smiled for the first time. The church doors creaked in wind, not music. The inn smelled of bread and ash. And the vicar's daughter lit a candle for her father and left the hymnal, blank and dry, on his grave. Elspeth was gone. No grave marked her. No story named her. But in certain winds, when dusk stretches the sky too thin and the bells of old churches ring without cause, you might still hear a hum. Soft. Sorrowful. Not quite song. Not quite silence. Just the breath between them.